This training video will show you how you can customize vendor drop-down lists for your particular conference. If you recall, when entering either a pledge or a check request, you are asked to enter vendor information. You have two ways of doing that. Once you've selected a vendor category, such as housing, you have a drop-down list, and it has a number of various apartment complexes that you normally would be paying housing assistance to. If you've selected utilities, the drop-down list would change to list a number of the utility companies that are customarily used by your conference. If there's not a vendor listed on the drop-down list, you can always check other vendor, and it gives the ability to enter information about the vendor. A CMS conference administrator has the ability to go to the conference page, go to the tab that says New Vendors and Vendors, and each time a new vendor is entered by a caseworker for any particular case, it shows up in the new vendor file. And this is the way that you can add it to your drop-down list. So let's say if you click on a particular vendor, you look at it. If it's a vendor that you believe will be used on a frequent basis and would be a good addition to the drop-down list, you can either choose to add and edit, which lets you change the information and add information, or you can add it as is without any changes, or you can dismiss it. In this case, we're treating this as a unique vendor that we would not normally see, so we are going to dismiss it, and it disappears from the new vendor list. But let's say, for example, there is a apartment complex that you know that you use regularly. You can, first of all, check to see if that vendor is already in the list. And that's what this bottom pane is. If you scroll through the bottom pane, in this case, it's Crossview Courts apartment, you can see it's already in the vendor list. You can actually click on it to see the information that's already included in the vendor list and in the dropdown. So in that case, you would not want to add this. On the other hand, let's say there's new apartments. You look, you see in this case is 600 Memorial Apartments in our vendor list. It is not, so you can choose to add it. If you want to edit the information, add and edit. You can then change the vendor name, you can change the street, you can put any additional information, you can add email address. Once you are satisfied with it, you can click Save. And at this point, it will no longer be in your new vendor list. It becomes part of the vendor list. So if you go back, it's no longer on your new vendor list. Go to the vendor tab, which is next. The vendor tab shows every vendor that is included in the dropdown. And it's good for a CMS administrator to go through this. And if they see a vendor that they no longer want to include in the dropdown, it may be that a vendor was originally in CMS when their conference initiated the use of CMS, but it's not applicable to their conference, so it can be deleted. So let's take the one that we just added, 600 Memorial, and let's decide that we are going to delete that. We can just call it up, hit delete, and it will disappear from the drop-down list. So this is a good practice to do on a periodic basis. If you notice, the work list that is presented under new vendors indicates those that have been entered within the last 30 days. And so it will be constantly updated. It's a good practice each month or several times a month for a CMS administrator to look at the new vendors and decide if they want to add them to their vendor list. Also, you have the ability, if you go to the vendor tab, you can always add a vendor that has not necessarily been entered by a caseworker. So if you know that there is a apartment or a utility company that is going to be used often by your conference, you can simply hit add. And when you hit add, it allows you to put the vendor category and put all the information about the vendor. As information gets updated, let's say that you learn that the energy company has a new mailing address, you always have the ability to go into the vendor list, change it to whatever the updated information is, and save it. So that is what a CMS conference administrator does to update the drop-down vendor lists that you find in CMS. I hope you find this helpful.